my fellow comic book collectors, it's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and these are the hottest Golden Age comics of the week. We're going to actually look at a very special collection that has just recently come up for sale on Heritage, and is still actually in the process of selling. We're going to look at the first part of this massive collection that just sold, and these are books that were from one collection that's probably one of the best collections of all time. So what happens when one of the best collections of all time sells? Well, we're going to find out. These books were all from the Christine Ferell collection, and she was basically a daughter or grandchild of this very, very, very wealthy family. They were the Ferell distribution company, and basically what happened was in the US they had the prohibition, and no alcohol was allowed to be sold. Well, once that prohibition was lifted, the Ferell family were the ones that got the first distribution rights in Vermont for selling alcohol, and they made a massive fortune as a result. Well, she was the daughter of that, or grandchild. I'm not sure what the connection was, but it was her family. And basically, she was a comic collector. She actually opened up 2 shops. I think she opened a comic shop and a game shop. And it was called East Prime Comics was the name of the comics shop. And she collected comics. She sold comics, but she was a collector. And her goal from 1970, and it took her like 37 years to do this, but her goal was to get a complete run or collection of all of the DC comics from 1935 all the way up to the time that she died. And she managed to do that. Actually, she, as I said, it took her 37 years, so she finished it in 2007. And the book that was actually the interesting thing about this was the book that stopped her from having that complete collection was a really obscure book from 1944 called The Fat and Slat Joke Book. It's just a really obscure book, probably super rare. And that was the one that was preventing her from having that complete collection for the longest time. She found it and got the designation of having a complete DC collection. So very cool collection. The thing about it, there are other people that have gotten the complete DC collections before, but with Christine, she was really about high grade. So this is not only like a complete collection, but it's a high grade complete collection. So some pretty major books in this one. I think there is one interesting element though, which kind of brings down the value of this collection though. She was collecting from the 70s all the way up till now. She just died this year, and that's why this auction has come up for sale. But during that time period, restoration was seen as a positive thing at one point. So some of the best books in the collection actually have that restored label. Where I think what happened is you could see that it was professional restoration, and you'll see that a lot in this list. So let's get into it. But that's the preamble. I hope that extra little bit of history gives you a sense of how important this collection is. This was just such a great collection. Just amazing. We're going to get right into it with number 1, which is one second, I got the wrong page showing. Which is Big Book of Fun Comics number 1. So Big Book of Fun Comics number 1 is actually a very interesting book. It's from DC Comics. All these are going to be DC Comics, so just DC Comics all the way through. This is from 1936, and it's the very first comic book annual. Okay. It's DC's first annual as well. It's a Gerber Very Rare, which is like, really, really like a Gerber 3 or 2. It's a really hard book to find. And she had a 3.0 copy of it. And it sold for $8,100. This was a raw comic. I don't know if they can actually grade these because of the size. They're fairly large books. So there's no actual comparative. So really hard to say. However, Heritage kind of provides some, uh, you know, previous sales and what they expected to have gone for. And they were predicting like a 4.0 copy to sell for around 5,500 and a 2.0 copy to sell for around 2,700. Well, this went for 8,000. So it was well above what they figured a 4.0 would sell for. So about, 50% above what a 4.0 would sell for. Now, as I said, there are 0 of these on the census, so 0 of 0. This is a ghost of a comic, but just a really cool one. And these are all these ones would either have like some certification with them to say that they're part of the Christine Ferell Complete DC collection, or it's on the CGC label when they're graded. Just this one is the ungraded one. Number 9 on the list is Flash Comics 86, again from DC, 1947. It's a Lee Elias and Joe Kubert cover, and it's the first appearance of Black Canary, Dina Drake. This book is one of those ones, even in low grade, goes for big money. Just a one that I've always wanted in my collection. Just a really cool book. This was a 9.0 that sold, and it sold for $28,800. It had off-white pages, so really high grade. I think the 3rd highest grade for this book. And there's really, again, nothing to compare it. You never see these kind of high-grade books coming up for sale very often. So there was no sales, no previous sales. However, we do have an 8.5 to compare it to, which sold for $28,800, same price, in July of 2021. So basically, the 9.0 sold for the same price as the 8.5 did 3 years ago. So this one was not a very strong sale. This book has actually been on kind of a down spiral lately, which is a good thing for me. I'm hoping to pick up a copy. So it's been kind of coming down in terms of price. There are 76 of these on the census, and 64 of them are Universal Blue Labels. Number 8 on the list is Green Lantern #1. Awesome book. So this was from 1941. It's a Howard Purcell cover, and it is the first solo comic for the Green Lantern. It is, has its origin retold. It is a scarce book. It's a Gerber 7. So actually, I think I messed up the Gerber on that other one. I think it's a Gerber 8 or a Gerber 9, maybe. And this one is ranked number 40 on the top 100 Golden Age comics of all time. So really major book. This was a 7.5 that sold, and it sold for $48,000. Add an extra 0 there. And this is a massive sale because the previous record was set back in November of 2007. So these books don't come up very often. They're big books. You just don't see them. They stay in private collections for a long time. Well, this one back in 2007 sold for $13,623. So it's up 3 times from that prior record. Now, the only thing that we have more recent to compare it to see if this is a really good sale was a 5.5 actually recently sold in January of 2024 for $15,600. So this one's only 2 grades higher, and it's sold for like 3 times. So that's pretty impressive sale. There are 135 of these on the census, and 90 of them are Universal Blue Labels. Number 7 on the list is All American Comics number 16. This is from DC Comics, 1940. It's a Sheldon Moldoff cover, and this is the origin and first appearance of Green Lantern. And it also has a full-page ad for All-Star 1, but this book is another really major book, probably one of the harder first appearance books to find, just because it is so incredibly scarce. It's a hard book to find. This was a 5.0 restored copy. and it sold for $50,400. It has moderate A3 restoration, so that'd be moderate professional restoration. Now, there are no sales again for this grade, but it did well compared to what a 6.0 restored book sold for in 2021. There was a 6.0 restored that sold for $43,200. So this sold for an extra $7,000 over that price. So very good sale for it. Now, if we compare it to the blue labels, a blue label 5.5, so actually half grade higher book, sold for $42,944 back in 2012. So that's the last sale for 5.5. As I said, these books don't come up very often. A 3.5, which is the most recent sale for an All-Star 16, was sold for $72,000 in 2020, September of 2020. So, these books don't come up that often, and when they do, they set records. This one definitely is a major sale for this book. Obviously, it's up from even what a 6.0 had sold for. Just a really strong sale, and it's way above a blue label 5.5. So very strong sale. There are 69 of these on the census, and 33 of them are universal blue labels. So that shows you how common it was to get books restored in these kind of really rare books, and very desirable books. So most of them are restored. Number 6 on the list is More Fun Comics number 55. This is from DC Comics, 1940. It's a Bernard Bailey cover, and it is the first appearance of Dr. Fate. And it's a 4th appearance of the Spectre. And it's a Spectre cover. Just a key comic for people who like these major DC characters. This was a 7.5 white pager, and it was sold for $50,400. It's also part of the Larson pedigree. And the previous record for this book was set back in May of 2017 for $16,751. So it's up almost 3 times, about 3 times from that previous record 7 years ago. A lot of time has passed, but it has gone up quite a bit. Now a 2.0, which is the most recent sale that we can look at, sold for $9,600 in April of 2024. So this book actually had gone up quite significantly around the hype around the Dr. Fate character being in the Black Adam movie. But I think even a 1.0 back in 2022 was going for around 8,000 to 9,000. So 9,600 actually is a down price, if that makes sense. So typically this book was going for about $10,000 per point back in that era of the movie hype and COVID kind of pricing. So I would actually say this one, even though it's a new record and it's well above what it sold for before, it's probably slightly down from what you would expect this book to sell for. So yeah, there are 60 of these on the census, and 35 of them are universal blue labels. Number 5 on the list is Detective Comics number 38. Again, from DC in 1940. It's a Bob Kane and Jerry Robinson cover. It's the first appearance of Robin, Dick Grayson. And it's actually the 3rd time that you see the DC logo on a comic. So another little bonus fact about it. This was a 6.5 that sold, and it sold for $72,000. Again, no previous sales for this book, so it's hard to compare. But we do have a recent 7.5 that sold for $90,000 in June of 2024. So this is kind of in line with what you would expect a 6.5 to go for. So a very strong price. for a great book. Just a really cool book. Can't say I'll be saying, oh, it's a great book, because they're all really awesome books. Uh, there's 153 of these on the census, and 82 of them are Universal Blue Labels. Number 4 on the list is Superman #1. This is from DC Comics, 1939. It is a Joe Shuster cover, and it is the origin retold of Superman. It's also the first time you get a comic devoted to one superhero. Typically, most comics before this were anthologies where they would have multiple characters in the same comic. So they'd each have their individual stories. Well, this was a real shift for DC to try, a real experiment. And they actually didn't even expect it to be anything. They really just were sort of capitalizing on the popularity of Superman. And what they decided to do was have a kind of a one-shot. They didn't even number it. So it's not even numbered. So if anyone says they have a Superman 1 and it has a 1 on it, it's probably not Superman 1, because Superman 1 isn't numbered. This was a one-shot, but then they realized it was very successful. It actually had multiple printings. And this book, started the whole concept of having comic books devoted to single characters. Very cool book. This was an 8.0 restored. And that's what I was saying. A lot of the bigger books restored. And probably this collection would have done a lot better if they hadn't restored a lot of the books. So, it was just a thing you did. Like, you have these big expensive books, you get them restored to make them look even better, right? This one sold for $81,000. Now that is actually really down. This one took a pretty hard. The previous record for restored 8.0 was set back in April of 2023 for $168,000. So this is down half what it had sold for just a year ago. Now, Superman 1 has been having really bad luck for the last while. I don't know why. It's just one of those books that hasn't really been performing that well. I think earlier this year I reported on a sale where it had gone down $1 million. So yeah, just bad things happen with this book. I don't know why it's been not performing that well. This one actually was a moderate restoration as well. So that means that it's got a fair amount of restoration and professional restoration. But if we want to compare it to a blue label, there was a recent sale of a 7.0 back in December of 2021 for $2.6 million. So just to put that in perspective, this book basically sold for less than a tenth or maybe a 20th of what so about 5% of what the blue labels are selling for. So to me, that's a really great opportunity, because I don't think that restoration should reduce the price that much. But I guess it does. So there's 185 of these on the census, and 77 of them are Universal Blue Labels. Number 3 on the list is Action Comics #8. This is from DC Comics, 1939, and it is a Fred Gardner cover, and it actually features an homage to N.C. Weiss' Last of the Mohicans. It is the first time we get like an homage cover. It's actually an homage, the first homage cover in comics. And it is rated number 70 out of the top 100 Golden Age comics. It's also the first time we get super hearing for Superman. So this is the first time they introduced that concept that he has super hearing. So kind of a cool book, a little bit under the radar. This was an 8.0 that sold, and it sold for $84,000. This is actually the highest grade on the census. The next highest grade is actually a 6.5. So this is well above the next highest grade on the census. There's actually no sales for this book because it was in her collection for the longest time. So this book is another ghost at this grade. It's just never comes up for sale. So we don't have much to compare it to. But the only thing we do have to compare it to is a 4.5 that sold, and it sold for $10,200 in March of 2020. Now, doing a bit of math, you'd say, okay, well, point value, you'd expect maybe 10,000. Not $10,000 per point. You'd expect $2,000 per point. Okay, roughly. So 8.0, maybe 16,000, maybe because it's the highest grade of the census. Well, maybe you double it, and maybe 30 some odd thousand. There is that kind of doubling effect that you have the high grades. That the fact that it's the highest. I think this book really did perform well. Maybe doubling effect. So maybe 60,000, but 84,000. That's a massive sale. Really, really performed well. There was only 39 of these on the census, and only 19 of them are universal blue labels. So that just shows you how rare it is to get it as a blue label, but to get the highest grade blue label, well, it's going to command big money. Number 2 on the list is Action Comics number 23. This is from DC Comics, 1940. It's another Joe Shuster cover. It's the first appearance of Lex Luthor, or is it? I'll get into that in a second. Lex Luthor in this appears with red hair, and it is rated number 41 out of the top 100 comics. Now, Lex Luthor is probably the most iconic villain for Superman, and this one is kind of interesting because it's also the first time the DC album is on the cover where it says DC Publications, and it's also the first appearance of the Daily Planet. So they mentioned the Daily Planet in it. But is it really the first appearance of Lex Luthor? Well, I did some sleuthing, and I found a book that actually appeared earlier that had Lex Luthor in it. So Superman number 4 was published 2 weeks earlier, and it featured a story with Lex Luthor in it. So it's one where CGC denotes it as being the first Lex Luthor, but I actually think Superman 4 is the one to get. That's the one with the pillars and like the bald guy. That's not Lex Luthor, it's just some bald guy on it. But this was an 8.0 white pager that sold, and it sold for $84,000. It is the second highest graded comic on the census, but again, no sales census. So we don't have any sales to compare it with. Now, the interesting thing was the highest graded one is an 8.5. So it shows you how hard it is to get these in really, really high grade. So an 8.5 sold back in March of 2020 for $72,000. Now, as I said, usually you get this kind of doubling effect at those very extreme high grades. So if you have the second highest grade, well, you'd expect it to go for about half of what the highest grade would go for. Well, this went for more than what the 8.5 had sold for. So this was a massive sale, very strong sale for this book. It went for an extra $12,000 above what the higher graded 8.5 had sold for. So very strong sale. There's 160 of these on the census, and 109 of them are universal blue labels. Number 1 on the list is what you would expect to be number 1. If you're going to sell a massive collection, what would be that big grail book at the top of the list? Well, it's Action Comics number 1. This is from DC Comics, 1938. It's a Joe Shuster cover. And it features the first appearance of Superman and his origin. It also features the first appearances of Lois Lane, Zatara, Martha Kent, and Jonathan Kent. So just a really key book. I mean, this is the book that started the golden age of comics. So very important book. It's probably the number 1 out of the top 100. So it's number 1 of the most desired comics of all time. And what do you do if you have a really nice copy of this book? Well, you get it restored, which is so sad because this would be worth a lot more if it was not restored. This was a 6.0 restored copy. They trimmed all 3 edges. So you're not even going to be able to remove that restoration. It's a moderate A3. And because of that restoration, it only sold for $324,000. Still a massive sale, but way below what a Blue Label would sell for. To give you a comparative, this book did sell in a slightly higher grade restored. There are no sales in a 6.0 restored, so we don't have any direct comparative, but a 6.5 restored book sold for $300,000 in November of 2021. So this is up about $24,000 over what the higher graded 6.5 had sold for. Now, if this was a Blue Label, this is why you don't restore your books, kids. Don't restore your books if you don't have to. A Blue Label 6.0 would sell for, and the last sale for 6.0 Blue Label was $3.1 million. Wow. $3.1 million back in January of 2022. Oof. So you basically lose, you only get about 10% of the value if you restore it. So just brutal. It was interesting. When I was researching for this video, I was reading about, the sort of preliminary kind of discussion about the collection and how the woman had just recently died. And they were talking about this very book. And they were talking about how a similar copy had sold for $3 million. And I don't think they realized that it was restored. And I think that would really detract from the value, because they were kind of hinting that it was going to sell for in the millions. It's very sad that it sold for so little. This is one of those things where I actually see it as an opportunity where if you can get a restored copy of like some major book, if attitudes change back to where they were 30 years ago about restoration, and instead of getting 1/10, you get 1/5 or 1/4 or some not so harsh fraction of the value, then you're doubling or tripling your money just based on the acceptance of restored copies. So I see there's a big opportunity there. But there's 81 of these on the census, and 44 of them are universal Blue Labels. So it just shows you how many are restored, about half. Okay, so that's it. What did you think of this collection? Have you heard of Christine Ferell? And what did you think? This is going to continue, guys. There's 8,000 books in the collection. So there's a lot more to see. We might do more investigations on some of the books coming out over the next few weeks from this collection. So again, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.